This is ESPR Boxing. Delighted as always to be joined by Danny. Um, Fabio Wardley will not be facing Frazer Clarke next. I think quite disappointing and a bit of a surprise to some people. The purse bids were supposed to be called for midday today. Boxer have pulled Frazer Clarke out, and he will now be fighting next month at York Court against Harry Armstrong. Danny, disappointing news. We'll see what kind of the fallout is over the next 24 hours or so. But what's your immediate reaction to this news?
Yeah, mate, disappointing is sort of the only word that comes to mind. Like the build up to this fight, this fight that wasn't to be, obviously, has been great. The whole sort of trio of Wardley, Adelaide, and Clarke. And they'd actually, if the purse bids were to happen and this fight was to get made, it feels like one of the biggest British title fights in a long time through that build up. And just incredibly disappointing. You wonder, like, because I've no doubt that Frazer Clarke wanted the fight. He's been vocal about it. He's got pretty annoyed at suggestions that he doesn't want the fight, and obviously his promotional company has said no. We saw Eddie Hearn's had a bit to say as well, which we'll come on to, and just feel for sort of everyone involved, bar Boxer. To be honest, like, you wonder, is it that they've invested a lot of money in Frazer Clarke and they're just, super risk sensitive? I don't see what else it could be. Like, as you say, he's fighting Harry Armstrong, who, as you mentioned pre-call, lost to Jamie TKV. Frazer Clarke's an Olympic medalist. Like, yeah. I don't know, just really disappointing, mate.
Yeah, not great. Just disappointing all around, really. Frazer Clarke is 6-0. So I think what's frustrating for some people is that a lot of people thought that he shouldn't be fighting for this title anyway. After only 6-0, hasn't really fought anyone of note. Arguably, his best performance is maybe Bogdan Dino, or Kamil Sokolowski. So those aren't names who kind of, if you beat, you just maybe deserve to be fighting for a world title in. I'll just read out Eddie Hearn's tweet that he's put out. I think he actually, at Kugan Cassius, put out a tweet at 9:40 this morning, just saying he was excited about the purse bid. Eddie Hearn retweeted that. I don't know at what time. So that goes to say that at 9:40 this morning, it was all systems go. And then 11:50 this morning, Eddie Hearn puts out a tweet, heard from the British Boxing Board of Control that Box have pulled Frazer Clarke out of the Fabio Wardley purse bid today. What a complete joke and a waste of our time, robbing the fighters of opportunity and the fans of a brilliant fight. Shambles. Quite obviously very kind of public tweet from Eddie Hearn, kind of really spoke his minds there. Don't think there's been a response from Ben Shalom or Boxer just yet. That's it really. Just any kind of comment on Eddie Hearn's tweet there.
Yeah, I laughed when I read it, to be honest. Like, you'll see Eddie like take little pot shots in interviews at like rival promoters and stuff. Obviously Leonard Ellery can vouch for that, but you'll very rarely see like sort of permanent tweet go out like that. And clearly he's very frustrated. By all indications, Team Wardley were game for the fight. Eddie claims we're ready to make a pretty aggressive bid for it. So yeah, it was funny. As you say, we've not heard anything from Ben Shalom or Boxer, and the court of public opinion is very much against them at this time. I've not seen like this sort of backlash against an individual promoter so like clearly, and people taking, maybe I suppose you could say Fury Usyk, but that was more at Fury than the promotional team in a long time. So it'll be interesting if we do see interviews from Ben Shalom where this is mentioned and what their reasoning is, because it all does seem a bit confusing at the minute.
Yeah, obviously there isn't kind of a big British fight week this weekend, including kind of Boxer or Matchroom, so it could be limited media access. But yeah, maybe there'll be an IFO exclusive tonight or something like that. What happens next? I think one final thing I'm going to say is that the fact that we've been told half an hour or so ago Frazer Clarke's going to be fighting Harry Armstrong, I think maybe says that this has been planned for a little while. The fact they've already got this fight lined up in a month's time for Frazer Clarke. So yeah, I think I don't want to say too much because I think more will be revealed in the next day or so, and this situation could change. What happens next for Fabio Wardley, do you think, Danny? I think we know what Frazer Clarke's doing next. He's expected to beat Harry Armstrong. But Fabio Wardley last fought Michael Coffey on the Joshua Franklin undercard on April the 1st. So you'd imagine he'd be fighting again. I'm going to say July, August time. I reckon August maybe. David Adelaide is a name that he could possibly defend his British title against. Dave Allen is someone else has been calling out for that fight. Yeah, what thoughts on those names, and if you think he will defend his British title next, or kind of fight a non-British fighter?
I'm not sure, mate. Those two names, along with Saul Deckers, are the three who've been sort of mentioned, along with Clarke. So the Deckers one's an in-house fight with Matchroom. You'd imagine that makes it a bit more likely. Although that's a tough fight for Fabio Wardley. I think Saul Deckers is pretty good. So it'll be interesting to see what they do if Eddie's willing to sort of put two of his heavyweights in together, because obviously, like, I know you can come back from a loss, but at that level it's more difficult, I would say. So yeah, that'll be an interesting one. The Adelaide fight would probably be a bigger fight. I think that's fair to say. Like, he's sort of, like Clarke, been involved in this sort of three-way back and forth over the British title. But you mentioned Frazer Clarke maybe not being justified in getting the shot. At least he's sort of got the amateur pedigree to back it up. Adelaide beat to justify it, really. So at least with Saul Deckers, he's won the English, and like, it's obviously not a mandatory for the British title, but it's the natural next step to make. Again, that all said, I wouldn't be surprised if it was another international opponent for Wardley. And as for Frazer Clarke, like, where does this leave him? You know, I don't know if his mandatory position will be rescinded or anything like that for withdrawing from purse bids. I'd imagine it's not great. And like, if not, I can't imagine Eddie Hearn dying, like being bending over backwards to make a fight with him again.
Yeah, we'll see. I think maybe a wider issue here is the relationship between Matchroom and Boxer now, with the Lawrence Okoli situation, the Joshua Buatsi situation, wards of words, them kind of Eddie Hearn doing an impression of Ben Shalom a few days ago. We'll discuss that maybe in another video, but that's one thing that concerns me, is the two promotional outfits' ability to make fights in the next few months or next couple of years, really, if the relationship is even more sour than it already was. We'll leave it there, Danny. I think just frustrating. I think we're all looking forward to it. Two undefeated heavyweights. Look, we've had some fantastic British heavyweight, British title fights at heavyweight in the past. Anthony Joshua versus Dillian Whyte, being one of the highlights. Yeah, we'll leave it there. Unless you've got anything else to say, we'll leave it there.
No, I mean, I think you've covered it pretty well. Just that boxer/matchroom relationship really doesn't look in a good place, does it?
No, and it makes you think. Look, one fight that springs to mind obviously is sorry, my mind's gone a bit blank now, but I just think moving forward, there's kind of big fights there's big fights out there you want to make, and I just think if there's any fights that Joshua Buatsi or Lawrence Okoli could come up with, they're not going to be facing Matchroom fighters anytime soon. I think that's pretty much guaranteed, and that's a real shame. But no, we'll see what happens. You never know. These people kiss and make up, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, if there's nothing else, then we'll leave it there. Fabio Wardley will not be facing Frazer Clarke next. And yeah, we'll see what happens next, if that fight can be made in the future. Danny, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, mate.